Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm here on behalf of the Lake Worth Beach CRA. Today, we'll be having an economic development webcast. Our featured speaker is Joe Minicozzi of Urban3. Joe, if you want to go ahead and take it from here, just a friendly reminder, if you could all mute yourselves. I think we'll have some time for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I'm going to go ahead and breeze through a lot of information. Really what I'm doing is telling a story about economic data and how we look at cities and city development and the ways that questions you should ask as a CRA representative, but also as a citizen. And just before I start, I did live in West Palm Beach for 5 years, and I was the urban designer for the city of West Palm Beach. And I lived on Forest Hills Boulevard area-ish. And I gave a lot of money to the Bamboo Room over my 5 years there. So I'm a big fan of Russell Hibbard and the Bamboo Room. So let's get started. So I currently live in Asheville, which is 4 hours, about 4 hours northeast of Atlanta. Beautiful setting, mountains, bluegrass music. We have 40 breweries. We're only 90,000 people. We have 40 breweries. That's a lot of beer. That's about 2,500 people per brewery, which is, I guess we drink a lot. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's your typical little quirky artist town, right? But we didn't start this way. Actually, Asheville suffered what a lot of cities went through in the 1980s. We were essentially flat on our face. Longer story to this, Asheville was one of the highest debt per capita cities from the Depression. And it took us until 1976 to get out of our debt. But we couldn't afford to tear any of these buildings down. So we had all of these fallow buildings just sitting around in this attitude of how people were here, that we had bought into these biases of what we thought cities were. So it was this attitude of that we're not urban, we're not going to grow up, we're rural people up here in the mountains. This is who we are. Citizens and any human, you tend to have a certain amount of luggage that you take into your decision-making process to look at cities, but we don't understand how they really function at a financial level. When you manage a budget as a city commissioner or finance officer, you're going to see it. And the same is true as a real estate developer, you're going to see it. In fact, I actually worked for this guy, Julian Price's company. Julian was a philanthropist and inherited a tremendous sum of money and put $15 million into a for-profit real estate development company with sort of a prove that you can do the right thing attitude. So we were funding restaurants that banks wouldn't fund, like the Laughing Seed, the first vegetarian restaurant in town, housing in the city, in the downtown, because there wasn't a lot of private sector housing. There's a lot of subsidized housing, but 75% of the money went into the sticks and bricks, fixing buildings. 25% went into business startups. We also started some like independent magazines, things like that. It's about basically cultivating the economic return of the city. So we'd take buildings like this is the old Asheville Hotel, and basically make apartments. And really what we were doing is trying to make places for people. So these are 400 to 500 square foot apartments. Not everybody's going to want that, but there is a certain part of the market that would choose that. So we made that happen. Now, bear in mind, this is a whopping 4-story building. We'll get into some taller buildings here in a second. But the challenge is, how do you help your community grow its wealth? And I'll give you an example. This is architecturally, it's not the greatest building on the planet, but from a design standpoint, we didn't get a chance to talk about the architecture because we had to work with the city to see the longer opportunity. This was a piece of land that we owned. We were approached by a hotel developer, and we owned this big old surface parking lot and a hot dog stand. Nothing great, nothing to write home about architecturally, not great for a city. We were managing the parking, and we knew that this parking was actually working in the market because we were renting it out to people all around, and we were cash flowing it. So it made no economic sense for us to develop it or even sell it. But we thought, let's do something better for the community. So we essentially worked with the hotel developer. We were going to do housing on the backside. Eventually, there's going to be a third building that sits over the top here that's like an upside down U. And then this is the hotel, and then there's a parking garage. So the city's going to own the parking garage. The hotel developer is going to do the hotel, and we're going to do housing on the backside, putting solar panels on it, grass roof, whatever. It was kind of fun as we were doing this, my boss was working on the project. I took a look at the legal contract. I'm like, really? Seriously? A 54-page legal document you're going to put in front of a bunch of elected officials? That's not fair to them. Show them what it is. So I made this cartoon of the legal contract so that everybody could understand that the city has fee simple ownership of this garage right here in green. So we know who the city is. They have an easement under our property. We have fee simple sitting here with air rights over the top of them that steps down. This red stuff is a cross access agreement. So you can get in and out of our property through our property to get to the city garage, which is great. That works for everybody. We turned the stair towers into basically vertical lobbies so that everybody shares the stair towers. So you only have to do a couple of them on the building rather than each part of its building having its own 2 different fire escapes. So it's just finding a way to make it better, and that what we're really doing is we're wrapping taxes around a non-taxable entity. So had we just sold the property to the city to do a parking garage, it'd be non-taxable. Had we sold it to the developer and walked away, we'd have made some money, but we wouldn't have gotten this benefit of housing and a parking garage. We knew that the area was underparked because we saw the numbers on it. So this is all about making our community better. It's about yielding more return for our community. This is how we got treated in our own independent magazine, which is quite awful that they would treat my boss like this. I mean, he's an awesome man, doesn't take a huge salary, and we're trying to make the benefit for our community. But no, we're apparently all developers are jerks, apparently. And this is the attitude that people have. And it's like, well, do you understand how to build a building? Do you understand what the cost of parking is? Do you understand the subsidy that goes to suburban parking? And yet you're going to have an attitude about what my profession is and how we're helping the community. And you eat at our vegetarian restaurant, you go to our nightclub, one of the top 5 nightclubs in the entire country called the Orange Peel. And these are businesses. These are people that have to survive. One of my friends who's a city planner said to me, she goes, God, Joe, that's great. It only took 4 years to get the contract signed. And I just about, my jaw hit the floor. And I was like, Sasha, look, it's in the master plan. It's your city's master plan to build a public-private partnership parking garage on our property. So it's even in the transit plan to do it there. So we're helping fulfill your plan. And you took 4 years, the city, to sign the contract. Do you know how many human beings my wife and I could produce in 4 years? 5. We could make 5 people. That's not fast in our world. In fact, we had to lay people off. I mean, you have to understand that a city is actually in the development business. You built a road, you got a pipe there. In your case of y'all, you have an electric system. So you have that commodities on real estate. You have to understand the cash flow that comes back to it, how to pay for these things. Anyhow, I did this presentation in 2019. I showed, okay, it's almost done. The housing just got finished in this dirt lot right here. And we're still waiting for this 3rd building, the upside down U, to sit over the top of this. But there's the parking garage. Here's the hotel. Incidentally, it's a 20-year bond on the project, and the city's going to pay off that bond in year 8. So from year 9 to 20, it's straight gravy on this project. They actually call it a cash cow. So we're just like, all right, how about doing another one? But anyhow, this is what we paid in taxes in 2008, and this is what it paid in 2018. So in 10 years, the city saw a 3,000% increase in taxes on this property, and they're paying off that bond. I was showing this to my former boss, and he's like, Joe, you always like using pictures. Just show it in pictures. And I was like, fine. So here's 11,500 next to 300,000. This is a huge gain in taxes to my community. And again, like I said, we could have just sold the property, walked away with our profit, and put our money into downtown real estate, let's say. So downtown real estate from 2008 to 2018 grew double in value. We'd have made double our money. Or we could have put it in NASDAQ and made triple our money. But no, we wanted our community to make wealth, in addition to us having a housing project that would be affordable for people that live and work downtown. And we wanted to see tax growth on our property. So this is what the community got in tax growth. Actually, it keeps going. So this is the benefit to a shared project. It's also building wealth, solving a problem, and not just being a standalone commodity of just parking. It's actually parking with a cookie crust of taxes. And what I find in all of these processes is that we have this attitude about talking about our biases, what we think government is doing, what we think the city is, but we never have a data-driven conversation about what it is. And it's almost like having a religious argument rather than a productive financial argument. So when we think about the land of a city, or another way that I use as an analogy is you talk to a farmer. A farmer is talking about land as a commodity. And that land is an economic model, the cash flow per acre, the water per acre, the labor per acre, what the productivity of the crop is per acre. That's the unit, is the land. So if we do the same thing with the building, that are crops that we grow, this is one of the buildings that we rehabbed. Incidentally, this is a 6-story building built in 1926. The sky is falling. It's a skyscraper, right? Old department store. We converted it into ground floor retail, second floor office, residential from there up. The tax value when we got a hold of it was $300,000. The city, to their credit, the city invested in the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for the public infrastructure. And they did. They had a commitment to the urban realm. They got rid of parking requirements in the downtown. They did lots of things. And they also had a proactive parking strategy to help businesses grow in the community. So it was this cooperative development. So thank you, city, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and the street tree. That's awesome. We took the value from 300,000 to 11 million. So that represents a 3,500% increase in taxes in 15 years. So do you have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? Wouldn't you like that? And there was pushback. People are like, well, Joe, that's cute and everything, but we've got this Walmart over here that's $20 million worth of value. And it's like, all right, well, that's 20 million. Ours is 11 million. So that's double the value. But you got to realize you took 34 acres of my community to make that happen versus our 0.2 acres. So that's really an apples to oranges argument. If you want to look at the thing in an apples to apples argument, analyze it per acre. We're producing 100 times the taxes per acre. So can you go out and make more Lake Worth? No, y'all are hemmed in by all of these other municipalities. The land that you have is the land that you have. So that's your commodity. When you look at the sales taxes per acre, we're producing double the sales taxes. Who would have thought that a furniture store, a tattoo shop, and a beauty salon is double the retail taxes of a Walmart? Residents, obviously, we have a lot more than them. They have none, unless you count the Winnebagos in the parking lot. And we have a lot more jobs. And I was presenting this in Seattle, and I was like, I need to make this easy for you people in Washington to understand this. If you could grow a crop, what would you grow? Wheat or marijuana? You'd grow the cash crop. Like, we understand that, right? This joke works in a lot of states these days, not here in North Carolina yet. But try to understand how to look at economics. And we already do this in other languages. We do this in crops, do it in your buildings. And I want you to realize this is not complex math. Don't think that it's not a gimmick. It's just simple economic math, or think of it from an efficiency standpoint. If we were to talk about cars, right? We don't talk about cars in a miles per tank basis, do we? Could you imagine if I was like, hey, my truck gets 650 miles per tank? You'd immediately laugh at me. You're like, Joe, come on, all tanks are different sizes. That's not how we measure. We say miles per gallon. And I said miles per gallon. Notice the numbers changed, and we should all be driving BMW Acetas. So if we have this language for a $3 commodity, shouldn't we be doing this for a $30,000 or $1 million commodity called a parcel of land? Understand the economics and how it works. And the other thing behind this is, when I was doing that presentation in Seattle in 2009, I actually had this quote up on the PowerPoint, and it's Mark Twain talking about literacy, which is a person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read. And I had my hand in the air, and I asked my audience, peers of mine, professional planners, landscape architects, urban designers, affordable housing advocates. I asked everybody in the audience, who has read your local tax policy to understand how your tax system works in your cities? And not a single person raised their hand. If I were in your audience right now, I'd ask your audience, who can explain to me your Save Our Homes Amendment and how it works between retail and commercial, and what the value growth is, and what the different subsidies that are baked into it. If you don't understand that pricing structure, we're functionally illiterate on how our system works, because taxes are super important. Tax policies are what pays for stuff. We need to understand how the community grows, the cost of those commodities, and the cash flow of how it's connected. So my downtown didn't get a new building. You saw all of those old buildings. We didn't get a new building until 2008. So the latent value of our downtown was essentially $550 million just sitting there. And when the city started the process, it was only worth 100 million. Now, to show you all that it's not all 11 roses, the jobs that you all do are always, not exactly met with great fanfare from citizens. In fact, this is one of my favorite citizens of Asheville. This is Chris Peterson, who's actually a friend of mine. But this is Chris, moaning and complaining about the city's $26 million of investment in streetscape projects and parking garages. $26 million. That is indeed a lot of money. I don't have $26 million in my pocket, right? But let's go back and look at the math. If you invest $26 million, a full quarter the value of the asset of $100 million downtown, and it grows to 500 million, is investing 26 in yielding $430 million. Is that a good return on investment? Yeah. And downtown is now worth $1 billion, more than $1 billion. And so it's that commodity growth, grow the value of your downtown. This is your golden goose. It will feed the rest of the family. The rest of the area doesn't produce as much potency and wealth as your downtown does. And also, just to be honest, you're not going to win Chris over. Chris is operating at a religious level in what he thinks downtowns operate, even though the guy's a business owner. I mean, he's got websites with fire and brimstone now. This is like the mayor getting hit in the head with a lightning bolt. I kind of love this one. He misspelled charlatans over here. I asked the mayor, I'm like, is that a liquor drink? She goes, it should be. But what we don't understand is what the city is that finite commodity of land that has to be cultivated and managed and understood at an economic level. In fact, if you look up the word incorporate, so Lake Worth is incorporated, so is Palm Beach County. Incorporate means to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So by law, you're essentially operating a really big real estate development project called the City of Lake Worth or the CRA area. It's like a sub corporation inside the corporation. And the state of Florida is incorporated, and so is our country. The United States, Joe Biden said this in 2016 at the Stephen Colbert Show. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. Now, I'm such a nerd, I looked it up. This down here on the bottom of the slide is the US code that lists us as a federal corporation. So my city, its taxable value at $14 billion right now is about 7 times the value of Ted Turner. Do you expect Ted Turner to just look at Facebook and just like check to see which way the wind's going to make his decisions? He's going to take feedback from the community. He's going to look at surveys, but he's going to also look at the numbers on his shows. He's going to look at the viewership on his shows. He's going to look at the data. So we've done this all across the country. We've done numerous places in Florida, 35 different states. When you mash up the data, it's real simple. For every dollar of county taxes somebody in an incorporated county pays to the county in county taxes per acre, the city dweller is paying about 5 times that to the same county. So citizens of the urban environment are actually more potent deliverers of county taxes than people out in the county. This is the Walmart, that's the mall. This is a 2-story building. This could be Driggs, Idaho, Durham, North Carolina, or Dallas. As soon as you start stacking your stories, you see this exponential growth. It's not a proportional growth. It's like a ski slope that takes off. This is a 6-story building. So we're not talking high rises here. This is all under the high rise code. So that's a massive growth in value. When I first started doing this, some people took this away as like I'm against Walmart or something, because now I've shown Walmart twice. I'm showing it as a box, it's a commodity. And in fact, just to show you something, I actually presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers Conference, which is one of the Squares conferences. Is there somebody there?
Yeah, hello.
Herman, you need to be on mute.
Oh, sorry.
So I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers. This guy was the keynote speaker. Speaking at an assessors conference makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. It's the squarest conference ever. This guy got up at 8 in the morning and presented spreadsheet after spreadsheet on how cheap his buildings are. And, it's just brilliant, right? You've got 3,000 assessors in one room and you prove to them how cheap your buildings are. Now I'm having a coronary because I'm like, how's he getting away with this and why does no one care? So in defense of the assessors, they're agnostic. If it's a cheap throwaway building, it's a cheap throwaway building. It's just data as far as they're concerned. So I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he honestly shot back 15, 20 years. We're designing the building to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings that throw away. So that's it. Their buildings got the life cycle of a cat. Are you okay with that? Is that a good investment for your community? In fact, actually, it's even worse than that. The average Walmart consumes more in police services than it pays in property taxes. So as soon as one comes into your community, you're immediately upside down. And people would say to me like, well, we like that they have cheaper goods. And I'm like, I understand that, but understand that you're actually paying for that transaction. You are losing money for them to offer lower good prices. It's that simple. They don't have a security staff because it's called the city police department. So just be aware of this. This isn't about hating the player. This is about understanding the game of how the financial system operates. And for me, I would argue that people don't see it because one is we're not asking the right questions. Two, a little bit of is information overload. We don't get the information presented to us in a way that we could see it. So this is how we look at our brain, right? I can show you a picture of your brain and do a CAT scan and show you your brainstem activity in blue versus your creative thought process in green. I can show you what's happening inside your head. Could I do an economic MRI of your community? So this is my county, Buncombe County, non-taxables in gray. So this is a big park, it's Mount Mitchell, a big federal park right there. It doesn't pay taxes. This is Mount Pisgah. So just to be crude, I don't care about it. It's not paying me taxes, non-taxable. I've got green and low value, purples and high value. So I got a lot of green up here by the mountain, and down here is a big purple splotch. That's the Biltmore Estate. The Biltmore Estate is $100 million property, which is impressive, but it's also 8,000 acres and has a 180,000 square foot house on it. So who's got a 180,000 square foot house? That would be no one else. This is the only one in the entire country. So it's really a wrong way of looking at it because it's like miles per tank, right? It's a big property, big value. Rather than total value, let's say value per acre. Let me just show it to you in 3D. So this is how we would communicate information. And when I talk to folks here in my community, in fact, there are people here out in the county. I've got 2 county voters for every 1 voter in the city. So we are outnumbered politically and they have a bias. In fact, I had this group that was a state representative out here in Fairview called our city a cesspool of sin. And then he doubled down and said, no, it's the downtown part's the cesspool of sin. And I'm on the board of directors for our downtown association. We're like, really? And I presented this chart and showed how much money we produced for the rest of the county out of our downtown. And back then it was about $3.4 million a year just in property taxes that goes out to the county just from our downtown. So rather than hate on us, how about send us a thank you card? And for the folks that are out in Fairview, they honestly don't know. You have to show it to them. So show them how little they're producing because they only know their tax bill and their relative point of reference might be a cousin that lives further out. Oh, incidentally, this is the prime, right? This is Asheville's downtown. This is our little cousin, Black Mountain, which is about 12,000 people, maybe about 9,000 actually out here. This is their little downtown and it's like only 2 stories tall, but look at it popping off the map. So for the voter, the majority of voters live out here in all of this kind of yellowish haze. We don't tax ourselves. That's what citizens do. We're just like, we all vote to not tax ourselves. And we put that burden onto the commercial environments. You better get the best out of it. You better feed that goose to get more money. And again, biases. People would tell me like, oh, that's North Carolina, we're different. It's like, all right, well, here's Kansas City, Missouri. Can you guess where downtown is? Manchester, New Hampshire. Guess where downtown is? Bozeman, Montana. Guess where downtown is? 7,000 population Brevard, North Carolina. Guess where downtown is? And it's not just property taxes. This is Thomasville, Georgia, which runs its city off electricity, utility bills. And this tall spike right there, that's a Chinese restaurant in downtown in Thomasville, Georgia. It's just like understand the potency of your community and where you're getting your money. This is the hospital right there, which is a really big consumer of electric utilities. But the hospital is just going to put that on your medical bill. That's going to cost you anyway. So understand the patterns of development and what you're getting out of it. And so back to what I would ask you earlier is I don't think we asked the right questions. I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat real quick on my side. Do I have ability to look at it? I don't see it. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to go without a chat unless somebody else can see the chat and ask you a really simple question. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to answer. I don't know how you're gonna answer without a chat, but just think in your head, 5 seconds, tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. It's real simple, don't overthink it. Tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. Ready, go. Okay. Anybody want to go more than 5? Anybody want to go more than 20? Usually when I do this, there's usually somebody that's like, there's 35. Anybody want to go more than 35? All right. I can't see anybody's hands. I can't see your answers. But let me ask you this. How many kids did you see on the school bus? I have never had anybody answer that unless they've seen the show before, but there's 5 kids on the school bus. It's 10 after 10 on the clock. What's amazing about how our brains operate is that I could just ask you a question and it will steer how you view information. You didn't look for the 5 kids on the bus. You didn't look for the clock because I didn't ask you those questions, right? And this is how, when we go to a CRA meeting, a commission meeting, a community meeting, oftentimes by the way that we ask the questions in the beginning, it's going to predispose us to eliminate a bunch of information and we just won't see it. So I would argue that we have to change the questions that we ask. First, you have to diagnose that there's a direct connection between land use economics. You need to understand it in an apples to apples way. So start with the per acre analysis. You need to understand how your standards affect that. If you require me to put all that parking down, you're essentially giving me a subsidy because parking is worth almost nothing and it's going to drive down the value of the real estate. You need to understand that there's geospatial relationships. Somebody that's further out the pipe is going to cost more than somebody that's closer into the pipe, or somebody that's further from a utility station is going to be more expensive to deliver services than somebody closer. It's really simple geospatial economics. Somebody that's living in a wetland or floodplain is going to be more expensive for the entire community because of stormwater needs. You want to visualize it, find some way to communicate with people, because let's face it, we're all busy, we're swamped with information. Don't drop a 600-page document on somebody and say, figure it out. That's not fair to elected officials. And understand that these are all choices embedded in the system. If you make it easier for me to get through to do a suburban building, I'm going to do a suburban building. It's easier. And finally, when you adjust policies, adjust fast, iterate. But don't think that you're going to be doing that same policy forever. You want to test something, try it, and then come back to it. And this is really important in Florida when you have Bert Harris laws. So do something like, let's do a holiday on parking. No parking requirements in the downtown for the next 2 years. You know, there's no promise that it's going to be there forever. So you've never given that full property right to the property, but you can try something and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, or if it fails, or if you get something you don't want, you can change the policy in 2 years. But to think that we're going to get everything right without any unintended consequences is just, that's you got to be a Pollyanna to think that way. As adults, we all understand that life changes and things we have to iterate. Secondly, look at other forms of information. Retail taxes. This is Hennepin County, home to Minneapolis. This is the property tax model. Minnesotans have great data. They give you everything. So this is their model of retail taxes. Here's Mall of America right here. And when the analyst was working on this, I said to Josh, I said, okay, there's Mall of America, which is the biggest mall in the entire country. What's going on with downtown? And it's like, here it is up here. So downtown was producing this much retail tax while the mall was producing this. Now remember, that mall is monolithically retail. Downtown has office buildings, government buildings, housing, and it's still more productive. And again, back to questions. We're not looking at where the money's coming from. We're not understanding how this all operates. And for you all, I understand you're a little different. You're not that much different, but there is the Save Our Homes Amendment, which is actually really not good for you. And it's voter approved. You all voted to shoot yourself in the foot. And under the last boom, this is actually a chart from Brevard, Florida, Brevard County. This is where the market went, right? And so when the market and what's being taxed, you see that huge gap. That's awesome. You're like, hey, we're not taxing ourselves that much. We're taxing on the red line, not the blue line. That's a huge gap difference. And that may feel good, but guess what happens? All real estate is cyclical. So when we went through the bust, everything dropped and cratered, and then it can only climb out of that hole at 3% or CPI, which is ever lower of the two. Last year, I think CPI was 1.8%. Like, does concrete follow that? So if you look at the market price, it's going to follow the blue line. So the price of concrete, the price of labor, the price of a tire is all following that blue line. So ironically, when governments are doing better in Florida, when the market is doing better in Florida, governments are doing a lot worse because your revenue gap separates. And this is why when you look at your budget, you can't afford things because it's just the reality of the marketplace. You've put a restriction on your revenue. The market doesn't have that restriction. There's other crazy things that I've seen governments do in Florida. This is Collier County, and this is actually their impact fee, which is supposed to be fiscally neutral. That is their law. It's supposed to be fiscally neutral or net positive. And you can see all these blue dots and everything are the different road projects that they studied. And this is the trend of the cost of road projects from 2012 to 2019, this dotted line right there, this is where they set their impact fee requirement, this green dot, which is below where the trend line is. Why would you charge somebody an impact fee that is less than what things cost and then call it fiscally neutral? And it's not just them. You could look at Florida DOT's numbers. This is what's going on with asphalt, 5% per year. So again, remember, y'all grew your revenue at 1.8%. So unless you add more people, you're not going to be able to keep up with the cost of your government. It's that simple. And when your citizens are like, oh, we don't want any more people to move here, we want to have 100% affordable housing and, I don't know, pay for artists or whatever, that's awesome. Where are you going to get the money? It's like, we're just going to not take garbage away or anything. I mean, so you have to understand this is all connected, but also in defense of the citizen, we have to help them understand this stuff. So this is a project that we looked at called Rivergrass in Collier County. And it, as a former Floridian and for y'all, you should be upset what they're doing over there because it's panther habitat and they just put this out there and they called it a village. It's insane. We were hired by the Conservancy of Southwest Florida to run the economic numbers. And blue is their total general funds. And actually Collier County does a good thing where they actually show you what goes to roads. That's this green thing called total 101 funds. So we just ran it. So as you know, remember, once you fill this thing up and people are living there, it's pretty much going to stay flat because your values don't grow. This is the cost of maintaining the roads inside the project over time. You're going to have to do a rehab every 10 years and eventually a reconstruction of those roads. Roads don't last forever. So this is the ultimate net cost of that one development in the county. So in your mind's eye, realize every 50 years, you have to rebuild all of the streets in your community. Doesn't matter where it is. So this is going on in Palm Beach County too. And if you look at the net of what they're charging, and this is the total funds of what they're paying for the roads. This is the net cost after 50 years. So in one life cycle, that's the cost of it. And just for fun, we're just like, all right, let's see if you can bail your way out with the impact fees, which you can't use for this project anyway. They have to be used somewhere else out in the county. This is the total impact fees. You'd never catch up to this. So be aware, this is all spatial analysis. I know this joke doesn't work for people under the age of 35, but it's still my joke. I like it. And I'll show you an example of how this operates, or maybe like a harbinger of things to come. This is Lancaster, California. Again, lots of Sunbelt places like, we're doing awesome, we're growing. And it's sort of like a Ponzi scheme. It's like fighting obesity by buying bigger clothes. You're adding new taxes, but you're picking up a whole lot of extra costs. So Lancaster is like up and over the mountain from Los Angeles, probably about the same distance from y'all to like downtown Miami. It's pretty far away. It's out at the edge of the Mojave Desert. There are 166,000 people. Your downtown is way bigger than their downtown. It's insane how small their downtown is. And you can see it in the model. Not good. They should have a bigger purple mountain than this. But what was insane is they have 953 miles of roads, which is the equivalent of running a road from Los Angeles to Portland. So really simply think of it this way. Every 50 years, they have to build a road to Portland. Now back to choice architecture. If you had the choice as a community to take down enough roads to build a road from Lake Worth to Atlanta, would you do that? Or Lake Worth to Washington, DC? Would you do that? If there was like, yeah, let's do that. Every 50 years, we're going to build a road to Washington, DC. If you had that choice, you would do that. So a lot of our choices happen without us really conscious of what we're buying into. The other thing is we don't see it inside the municipal budget, because if you look at the budget standards list roads as assets. And whenever we talk to finance officers, in fact, I do a lot of work with the Government Finance Officers Association. And I think they need to change this, because if you talk to me, if I've got a computer, that's an asset. If I have a delivery vehicle, that's an asset. Or if I have real estate, that's an asset. I can sell the house or the building. I can sell the truck. I can sell the computer. That's an asset. It's got value. A liability is something that I'm stuck with and I have to maintain. So we ask finance officers, like, can you pick your roads up in Lake Worth and sell them to West Palm Beach? No. You're stuck with them. So if you look at it as a liability, it's a different kind of cash flow. And as an elected official, the easiest way to see it is look at your depreciation schedule of all of your infrastructure. That's showing you your liability. And that's what the cost is of your community in perpetuity. So looking at the roads, this is when all of their roads were built. And you can see they didn't have a whole heck of a lot of roads before 1920. But after World War II, they got a little crazy. And you can see 1953, how many roads they took down. And that's a lot of lane miles of roads. So what's scary is that came back to haunt their parents' generation with the first rebuild cycle. So when you see capital infrastructure, or you see that, oh, we have to take out a bond, you're essentially paying off a new mortgage on your real estate. But that's going to come back to haunt you again. So what they did to get more money is they annexed more land, they allowed development, and they got more roads with it. So they got more new roads. This comes back with the second build and brings along with it the new stuff. Now you're into this cycle. This is the Ponzi scheme where you're trapped into the system of perpetual payoff. So we stopped them in 2016 and just said, look, don't add any more to this because it's already bad enough. This is what you currently own. Let's look at your build rebuild schedule of just what you're carrying. And now you could look backward and see how insane it is. You can see that looking backward to their first wave, no one was penciling this out in World War II. You can look at any document of any city, any growth plan. You can go back in your own records, in your minutes. No one was thinking of the long-term obligation of taking on all of this new infrastructure. And then because it became habit, we're just like, well, Joe, this is who we are. We're suburban. Everybody has cars. That's reality. Get over it. It's like, all right, fine. But you've doubled down on the investment and now it's getting bigger and bigger. And remember, I'm not adding any more to the system. And this isn't even inflation adjusted. Remember what I showed you about the asphalt. It's going to grow at 5% per year. This doesn't even show that. So Lancaster right now, if you flushed all of their money into the system, they can only afford 50% of their roads. And that's the cold reality of what they own. So be honest with your citizens and show them this. You know, we figured out that Asheville, my community here, which is like clicking on all cylinders, we have a very potent downtown. We have buildings that were built 16 stories tall in 1920. And yet we still can only afford like about 2/3 of our roads. So this is a habit that we see with cities, particularly American cities, that we just hope somebody else is going to bail us out. We're just optimistic. It's like, surely we can just continue on our ways and somebody else's problem. And it's an addiction. I understand this is super depressing. There are ways out of this, and let's kind of start that direction. So Eugene, Oregon, we did their analysis. They have a growth boundary around their city. This is their revenue. This is floating their whole city in the intercoastal and looking at it at a water line level. So what's below the water line is the cost of all of the development. And this is just the physical stuff, not even the police and fire department. This is just pipes, roads, any kind of curbs, gutters, whatever. It's just the hard physical stuff. When you look at it in the full reserve account that you should have in your system, it is extremely expensive and it dwarfs your police department, trust me. So this is the cost of all the development patterns. The green stuff is the revenues coming out of the property. So we have revenue, we have cost. You can see you choose to live out here. This is what you're paying in taxes. Let's net your cost against your revenue and see what's in the black and what's in the red. And then this is the whole city in 3D. The downtown is highly productive. It's net positive. Now, we're not saying everybody needs to move downtown, but you need to understand that's where you're getting your cash. You're also getting some in other areas. Let's be agnostic about it. And you can see the grade. If you lift this up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, you can see the spread of subsidy across the model. So we went into the different building types, the ingredients that make up the city to show what their net position is. And this is just a really simple way of looking at the ingredients. Residential, low density, medium density, high density, commercial or mixed use, low, medium, high, commercial, low, medium, and high. We call this the Brady Bunch slide. It's like, let's just 9 typologies. This is the sticker prices. So the American single family house is subsidized to the tune of $1,400 per acre. You know what's crazy is this isn't even a surprise. The Nixon administration did an analysis in 1973 called the cost of sprawl and proved the same thing. Rutgers University did. Lots of studies have been done with this, but we have to show it to citizens so they understand it. And we also have to understand the market bias that, what people are going to say when I show them, and they did this in Eugene, I want a house, like, great. But for 80% of your land use, I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think you should pay for that. Like, what kind of nonsense is that to run a city? So understand the desire that's there and figure out, well, can we afford it? Or more importantly, look back at your city as in planning terms, they call this a transect. It's like a series of tree rings in your city, and make sure you balance it out. So you have to harvest wealth from some other places to be able to afford all that suburban single family detached product. It's that simple. Or you need more townhouses, or you got to do something to grow up those other parts of the tree rings, but you can't have one tree ring being 80% of your tree. So back to the model, definitely build more stuff downtown, but also remember what I said, the model's showing you other things. You can look out here in Crescent Village and you see a little bump right there. Do 4 more of those. Maybe do like a tax increment district in 4 different districts to cultivate new growth in other areas. The other thing that they were missing is how they were bleeding themselves by not even looking at the revenue system, again, in a geospatial way. So if you look at the city, this is the city whole system. They have a lot of roads, and just for fun, I mean, this is a highly environmental community, and we just decided to pull their leg. We're like, when you look at your roads and you shove all your roads together, that's an impervious surface area of 3.3 square miles. So we showed them what it looks like next to their city side by side. And we asked the engineering department, we're like, so what do you charge the city for all of the impervious surface? And he was just blank. And I'm like, that's, somebody's got to pay for that bill, right? It's like having a 3-mile parking lot. They have enough roads to go from Eugene to San Francisco. So to run them through a thought experiment, we said, let's take your city and turn it into a big square. So this is the city's area. This is it as a square. And let's just break it down by impervious surface. So this stuff is all impervious surface. You have 5 square miles of buildings, 3 square miles of parking and roads, and 23 square miles of everything else. That's like backyards, buffers, berms, whatever. When you look at the numbers of the wealth, you can see how little value parking has compared to buildings. Now, remember, that's 2/3 of that area, and it's way less than 2/3 the value. And also remember, the roads cost you money. So they need to have $600 million of value to cover the cost of all those roads somewhere. It's not coming out of the parking. Now, incidentally, we know who's using the roads. That would be called cars. We know who's using the parking. That would be called cars. So shouldn't the parking value be at least $600 million to pay for itself? That is called a subsidy. And you're not getting anything out of all the rest of the stuff. Your yard pays you nothing in taxes. That's the reality of our tax system. So as a thought experiment, we said to the engineer, we said, okay, your stormwater system costs $400 million, right? For 40. And he's like, yeah, that's what it would cost if you went out and rebuilt it right now. But you're going to have to rebuild it. All of that stuff needs to be replaced. That's super expensive. So just as a thought experiment, what if you could go back in time and change your choices? What if you could say, you know what, Joe, we're going to have less 1-story buildings. We're going to still have the same amount of square footage of buildings, but we're going to have more 2-story buildings and reduce the footprint and get those buildings closer together. And if we do that, we're going to need less roads and less parking because more people could walk. So now we've just cut the impervious surface in half. Okay? So if we cut the impervious surface in half, doesn't that cut down the cost of the system to $200 million? And the engineer was like, yeah. I said, okay, so if we could imagine this, imagine if you could turn back time to 1940 when Lake Worth just started taking off and said, what's the best way to spend $222 million? Would you choose stretching yourselves out and building a really big stormwater system and fighting Mother Nature? Or would you choose to put that money into, I don't know, a greenway or an art teacher or a dancing traffic cop? How would you choose to spend $222 million? After school program? I mean, you could do a lot of stuff, but you need to understand that what you've got going on when this system gets built, the system is not magically happening through invisible forces. It is happening because we're offering it all of these subsidies without being honest about the cost of that. And that's a transference of wealth. Just to close on one last point, in what we've all gone through with COVID, in matters of equity. We've all had conversations about equity, but we need to understand that this is a real deep problem that we need to be honest about. And I'm going to turn back the clock a little bit to 1934 because we're talking about housing. 1934, the federal government stepped in and changed the way that we do mortgages. Mortgages went from 7 years to 30 years. That was a huge jump. They wanted to underwrite mortgages to get more people into housing to basically stave off socialism. That was going on in Europe. We're in the middle of a depression. They were going to do anything they could to get people to have real estate. Only certain people. So they created these maps. They said, you do the maps in your community. Any city over the population of 50,000, y'all weren't there, but you still adopted similar policies to basically have desirable neighborhoods, best. Blue is like okay neighborhoods, yellow is declining, and red is hazardous. And they left it up to the community to figure out what's hazardous. Now, hazardous was deemed by the basically ethnicity of people in the community or what their living conditions were. If you look at, this is Denver's map, and you can see where their green neighborhoods are, mostly suburban, and their red neighborhoods were all around the core. Two hazardous people, your foreign-born population, and your Negro population. That was their terminology. So you had them, if you're Black, you're hazardous. And then other communities could choose the hazardous immigrant du jour. In 1930, that happened to be the biggest immigrant class. In 1930 were Italians, my people. Coming in at number 2 were Germans. So think about which Germans were coming in 1930. That would be called Jewish people. So most cities were deemed them to be unfit or hazardous. So here's the Italians. 35% Italians in that neighborhood. That's really bad. You got to watch out for us. We're nasty people, us Italians. What I find comical about this is right next door is this neighborhood that's yellow. It's actually got more Italians in it, 50% Italians, as opposed to 35%. But the reason why these Italians aren't that bad is because these are the mafia Italians. These are the ones that peddle liquor. Now, as an Italian, I can change my name to Smith and you'd never know. You know, it's like I could move into another area. For Black individuals, they can't change their skin. So if you look across the tracks, you see a Black neighborhood. This is redlined. We've got cheap houses in this neighborhood. So it's bad. Negro population, they don't even give you a percentage. It's just yes. So here's what happened. Think of this. Just because this map got drawn, folks in this neighborhood wake up, they can't sell their house at all. From 1934 to 1968, the only way that they could sell their house is if they go to a predatory market, if they go outside the system, but they certainly aren't going to get a secured loan. That removes equity from that family. The yellow Italians across the way could sell that real estate. They could build wealth in their family. This is just all because of a map and a policy. Now, what's disgusting about what's disgusting enough, but it gets worse. If you look to the neighborhood next to this, that's also redlined. Let's go ahead and read this. This is straight out of the government documents. This is one of the best colored districts in the entire United States. It's known as the Negro Country Club. But for the fact that there's colored people here, it'd be a yellow neighborhood. You know, there's brick houses. This is good investment. And so look what they say. These folks have to go outside the marketplace to find a way to finance their houses. This went on until 1968. So when we do these models, this is Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri. When we do these models, we see it. We can see the evidence of redlining right here. You can see how there's almost like somebody cut the model right there, and you've got this orange plateau, and then it all turns yellow once you cross the street. That street is called Troost Avenue. It's the equivalent of Dixie Highway. So you've got west side of Dixie versus east side of Dixie. Dropping Troost Avenue onto the redline map, you see how east of Troost is predominantly redlined. That's what was going on in the system. Somebody raised their hand. I can't see the question. Do you want to wait till the end for questions, or you want me to take it now?
Joe, let's wait until the end for questions if possible.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. So we dropped the map on a racial map showing the racial demographics of the community. So there's one map laying on top of the other. If you look east of Troost over here, there's still a predominance of Black folks sequestered in these neighborhoods. Now, this is all an emotional thing. This is fine. I get it. You know, it's just demographics and a map. But there's economic consequences to this. Now, remember, when you can't sell your house, when you can't get a mortgage improvement loan, when you can't get into the equity system, you're either going to pass that house on to your kids are going to move to Chicago because they're like, you know, this town's racist, I'm out. So they're hanging on to the family's house, managing it the way that they can, but they're not doing it as like real estate professionals. They're doing it because they have limited options. And so you see that we mapped all of the vacant land because that's where the economic decline happens. And you see a high predominance of vacant land in the redline neighborhoods. What a surprise. It's a quite immense portfolio of real estate. So on the Kansas side of the river, you're looking at 3 square miles. If you just shove all those parcels together. On the Missouri side, it's 7 square miles. And these folks are complaining like, oh, we're having a housing problem. It's like, well, there's a place to start. Why don't you find a way to turn this around? You know, it's because of your policies that you caused this problem. So you should own it. let's get past that. This little white hole right here, they've annexed completely around another city. This city right here in this white hole is called Gladstone, Missouri. That's 20,000 people. That is a land area of 20,000 people. You could house 20,000 people right now. You're paying for the road, the pipe, the garbage truck. You're losing money. In fact, when you look at the model and we tapestry the red line model over the 3D model, you see this haircut. Everybody's taking down the districts. Today, 50 years later, after we stopped doing this stuff, on the Kansas side, they're even worse. Now, the Kansas folks are a little bit more open to having this conversation, and they asked to dig deeper. So we showed them all of their vacant land. This one neighborhood up here is called the Quindaro neighborhood. It's about the land area size of, it's a little bit bigger than Pleasant City in West Palm Beach. But look at all the vacant lots in here. Incidentally, John Brown's grandfather opened the first free Black university west of the Mississippi in this neighborhood. And you can see the pummeling that it took in vacant land. Now, for the folks that are left in that neighborhood, what do you think their attitude toward government is? So these are all the people not paying their taxes in yellow. They're just like, screw it, and who could fault them? I'd feel pretty desperate about my community as well, but they've got to turn it around. So if you look at, there's 732 vacant lots in that neighborhood. The average value is about $400, which is nothing, but that's the reality of their marketplace. If you put buildings on it, you're looking at a whopping 17,000 of value, taxable value, which is still nothing. But on the positive side, 17,000 is 40 times more than 400. So that's a start. So going back in time, just as a thought experiment, where we found the old value that was listed in the red line information, and we took these 732 vacant lots and glued houses on them and said, let's just assume you never had this policy. In these properties, we're paying taxes for the time that redlining existed. What did you lose in taxes over that time? So we ran the numbers, and it's $30 million over 80 years. So in presenting to their community, I said, look, you need to understand that your great grandparents are racist. There's no way around that. That happened. Own it, move past it. That cost your community. They basically wrote a check in this one neighborhood for $30 million. What does that add up to when you add up the whole rest of the community? You need to turn this around. It's going to take 18 houses. That's it. In this one neighborhood right now, you're declining. To just level it out, it's going to take 18 houses. Now, the reality of the marketplace, you can't just say, we want this housing to happen. You need to understand what's going to happen when you go talk to a bank. The banks are going to say, hey, Joe, a house costs $180,000 to build. There's no way we're going to underwrite it because the tax value is $17,000. Are you going to get the banks to change their behavior? Of course not, because banks are biased. They can't understand the consequences of this math. They don't understand that this math is essentially due to racist policies, and they're certainly not going to own it. You can't change the banks, but you can go outside of that. You could do a bond. You could use in your general fund. Surely you can find 18 people inside City Hall that would choose to live in that neighborhood if you gave them affordable housing. So underwrite it. Find a way to turn this around, but you can't keep this existing condition. And for lots of people, they feel a lot of guilt about this stuff. And they're just like, well, we stopped doing this, Joe. And it's like, no, this is I used to live down there. I remember reading the paper every winter when like the Sun Sentinel or the Palm Beach Post brags about all the rich people out on the barrier island. And this is from 2019, I think. Yeah, I'm bragging about all these millionaires from Mattapan, like up to Palm Beach. And these are ridiculous houses. I mean, you all know, you've driven by these things. This is a 58,000 square foot house. It has a separate red and white wine tasting room. I don't know what they do with a rosé or a champagne. I guess they go on the lanai. This is got two mansions. You can't have one mansion. You want to move your spouse across the street because you want to crowd yourselves. But that's got two mansions on that one. This mansion has a golf course because we all need a golf course on the ocean. This is straight out of the newspaper. Now, by now, I'm an apples to apples guy. This is total value. What is it per acre? So when you look at the numbers per acre, we need to rearrange these. The poorest one is actually, or the smallest one is actually the most productive. The double mansion is in the middle of the pack, and the golf course one is the least productive. That's the reality. So let's go from the one percenters to the multi-dollar mansions, the people like us. Unless there's a 1% on here, sorry. But this is just regular middle income stuff. Delray Beach, West Palm Beach. This is in Mango Promenade. I grabbed a Lake Worth house right here. little guy right there at 3,500. This is in Northwest neighborhood in Palm Beach, downtown West Palm Beach, and this is Pleasant City. She's paying 900, let's call it $800 in taxes. But to be fair, her shotgun shack is like the size of a parking space. So per acre, she's actually crushing it at 32,000. This one in Lake Worth is paying 46,000 per acre. But let's take this guy right here in the middle at Mango Promenade at 70,000. He's actually more productive than the golf course one. Now, he doesn't have a golf course, doesn't even have a yard. He's got his jacuzzi and his parking space. And he's also on Mango Promenade, a block with no street. There's a road, a sidewalk that goes through the middle of the block. So he's got infrastructure. That's awesome. That's highly productive. Even more productive are these townhouses. These are townhouses on the back side of the convention center. 5,000. This is in near Carefree Theater. These guys are in Delray Beach. 6,000 per acre. $400,000 of taxes per acre out of that townhouse. Would you have said that a townhouse is better than a double mansion? They are. You know, this is in most communities, these are illegal. You know, people are tying themselves to trees if they try to get built. You know, it's just, we just don't understand the economic potency of stuff. And it's also housing for people, very affordable and very modest and productive. I used to stop the show there, but you know, it's Palm Beach County. I could have some fun with you guys. This is rest in peace, Rush. This is Rush Limbaugh's mansion out on the ocean. Check this out. A market value of 56 million. His taxable value is about 29 million. So he gets a 50% haircut, perfectly legal, from his market value, from his tax value, because we all voted like, hey, we want to give ourselves a tax break for homeowners. Well, guess what? Exponentially, it's much more awesome for the richer people. When you look at this woman and see what she gets, is that even remotely fair? She's getting less than 1% reduction from her market to her tax value. And this guy is getting a 50% haircut. Perfectly legal. Would you say that that's equitable? Would you say that that's the intention of the policy? Is that something we should be talking about as citizens? Now, remember, she's at 32,000. Remember that house in Lake Worth is 45,000, which is way more productive than Mar-a-Lago at 28,000. She's more productive than Mar-a-Lago. So we need to be literate about this stuff and how this operates. And I'm just going to show you a couple of quick little things, and then we're going to close here. If we're not looking at policies, standards of practice, how decisions are being made, we don't understand the economics of our community. So back to that assessors conference. I showed this map. This is, if you take, you've got buildings that sit on top of dirt. So inside GIS, we can just turn off all the buildings and just look at the dirt value per acre. So there's no buildings on this map. We're looking for how policies are created when we do a map like this. So think of it as like a CAT scan. And up here in the upper left up here, you can see all the houses are generally blue. This is telling us that's what you'd expect in the neighborhood. Everybody's about the same value. Over here on the right-hand side, you see all of these freckles of different colors. That's either human error or policy that's causing that. But more importantly, when I was presenting this, you can clearly see there's a mall right here. So this is the dirt value under the mall. It's parcels inside the mall, but generally a mall is blue for its dirt value, which is $15,000 an acre. Inside the same zoning district, when you cross the street, it doubles in value to 35,000. So I asked the community, I was like, how is it that when you cross the street, land doubles in value? And the tax assessor was there and she raised her hand and just yelled out into the audience. She goes, you don't understand tax policy. I said, help me out. What am I missing? Now I understood the policy because I'm not naive. And I was just playing along. I was like, well, what am I missing? And she goes, well, they've got a bigger parcel. The bigger the parcel you have, the lower the unit value because there's less people that can afford a bigger parcel. The mayor just started laughing. I'm like, really? You give me a discount if I get a bigger parcel? I said, what about the 3 miles of roads that are around this property? And this fella only has 200 feet right there. She goes, we don't count roads as part of the infrastructure. I said, so the money that you put into the ground, you don't care about that. There's no value there. She goes, no, there's no value. Everybody in the room was aghast. I'm like, really? And also, like, the bigger parcel, does that work that way with diamonds? If I get a bigger diamond, is it cheaper? Because surely less people can afford a bigger diamond. She's like, well, I never really thought about that. So I went to the assessors conference to ask them, because literally, I'm not making this up, their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. So I asked them, how is it fair and how is it equitable? Now, in their defense, their response was, it's not. And I'm like, so if it's not fair and it's not equitable, do you know where this policy came from? Did Moses give you this standard? They all, by the way, they all thought this was funny. And they seriously, they told me like, you need to talk to Larry Clark. So I go talk to Larry and Larry's like, yeah, we probably need to change it. So this is going to steer your market. It's going to steer what's going on inside your system. There's all these other policies that are essentially shooting yourselves in the foot and how your community operates. And I just wanted to hopefully illuminate some of those with your community and help you understand what's happening economically in your community. And let me just kind of jump to a close. All of this, we call it geo-accounting. It's just, you're going to look at your geographically, look at your accounting system, look at your finances and put it on a map, because the city is spatial. And like an accountant, you know, your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Don't use judgment. Or don't judge the decisions. This isn't about humans being bad. This is about these policies that have created. And if you can afford a boat, awesome. If you can't afford a boat, don't buy the boat. But you need to understand where you're leaking your money. You need to understand, are these siloed practices that have two different arms of the government don't talk to each other. I can tell you, when I worked as a zoning official, I never really talked to the finance officer about this stuff because that was all gibberish to me. And so, you know, we need to get a common language to understand that, to understand how, is it zoning policies that are causing it? Is it tax policy? Is it the way that we make decisions? I don't know what it is, but we're leaking our money all over the place, and you got to put it on a map so that people can see it. So we see these maps as sort of a visual common language. It's like a Denny's menu. We can see the picture of the eggs now. Also, I'll close with one book in an organization, Strong Towns. I don't know if you all follow Strong Towns and Chuck Marone. He's awesome. And a lot of the street and infrastructure stuff, he's been the siren call for that for the last 10 years. And a lot of the models that we do come from his thinking. So thank you for letting me go through a lot of math in an hour, and I can get to the questions.
I'm going to unmute Evelyn, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Wait, can you hear me? I just wanted to make sure. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So my name's Evelyn. I'm actually a recent Lake Worth local. And so thank you for taking the time to actually do this. I had a few different questions just based on everything that you spoke about. Regarding the roads exactly, so you had mentioned like how we can make it, I don't know if I'm going to use the proper terminology, but profitable, or, you know, there was actually like an event that we, that some of the locals did recently where we, you know, got together, rode our bikes around town just to kind of raise a little bit more awareness that, you know, bikers can or should be just as comfortable on the roads as anyone else. I am actually originally from New York. I had just moved from Jersey City before moving down to Florida about 2 years ago. And one of the things I loved about Jersey City is the walkability. And they had, you know, shut down certain roads to kind of create a walking, like I guess, pavilion, I guess, or town square.
Hello.
Hello.
It would be great if there was more like kind of a walkability to the town. So that's part one. Part two really is in terms of housing, when you had mentioned you know, the minorities in different states. You know, my family is from Nicaragua. They migrated here in the 80s when the whole Civil War was happening down there. And things that I fell in love about Lake Worth specifically is that there's a large Latin community, you know, just across the tracks, and, you know, the food smells and tastes just like home for me. And I'm in the process of kind of creating like a Lake Worth platform to just kind of like bring the community together. And one of the things that one of my friends had mentioned, which they brought up a good point, was if we bring, you know, if we bring Lake Worth to be a little more visible. You know, I work in real estate too, and I just see the way the market goes. And will we lose some of that, I guess, flavor that makes Lake Worth so, you know, wonderful? And when I see all these new developments, you know, the condos and the high end, for example, the building that's going across Bryant Park, will that kind of gentrification, and I hate using that word, but it just gets thrown around so much, will that affect the other communities, and how can we save that?
What was your question?
I guess my main concern really is how can we bridge that gap? You had mentioned Dixie.
Well, okay, so from a standpoint of one is eliminate the word gentrification from your language.
Absolutely,
And
I agree.
it's too loaded. It's a dog whistle. And to be honest with you, it's like, all right, you work in real estate. What would be your solution?
Well, that's the thing that I've been trying to talk to different.
Hang on. Yeah, that's the thing is like, yes, displacement is the key thing. So it's for folks of the community, it's think about their wealth opportunities too. So, and also I kind of skipped over this. So I just want to show you something there. This is my neighbor. And this is like straight out of the tax system in the way that our system operates. I live in this brown house right here. It's a duplex. I live upstairs and rent out downstairs. And my neighbors, the Lordmans right here, Black family, fixed income. He's got all sorts of COPD and PTSD and whatever. And we just did a county reassessment. And if you look at three numbers, you look at his land value per acre, his building per square foot value, and the change from last assessment to this assessment, right? Those are just three numbers, right? That's it. Go over and look at the country club area, the golf course community, and this house facing the ninth hole and also facing a mountain. So in my world, this is like a bay view, is to be able to see the mountain. If you look at the property and just look at its tax value, it's 500,000. But when you look back to those three numbers, here are their numbers: 450 for dirt value per acre, 107 bucks, 106, and 9,000. So let's compare that to my neighbors, the Lordmans. The Lordmans are 10% more valuable for their dirt, and they don't have a great view. Their building is $127 a square foot versus $107 a square foot. Would you look, if you were as a real estate professional, would you look at this house and say it's more valuable than that one per square foot? But our assessor does. So the value growth has been 19% versus 6%. When you look at the taxes paid, that's that. Now let's go from that to oceanfront, which is top of the mountain for us. This is a house that's got a tennis court on it because, we all need a tennis court on top of a mountain. Wealthy house. When you look at the dirt value, they're only 84,000 versus 440 versus 500. So just by how we price things causes gentrification. Is that fair for my neighbor to be priced out of their house? And the narrative that we always tell ourselves is like, oh, it's because Joe's white, he moved in there and whatever. It's like, no, that has nothing to do with that. If you look at the whole trend of how the values of our buildings go, let's kind of jump to that. This is the quintiles of housing from the lowest 5% or 20% of houses have grown by 300%, while the highest 20% of houses has only grown by 138. So what we're doing is we're suppressing the value of the wealthy houses and matriculating them much more slowly. And then if you talk to the assessor, and this, I can guarantee you this is true in Palm Beach County, and you saw it with Rush Limbaugh and Donald Trump. And again, maybe I shouldn't single those two out because the same is true for Jimmy Buffett. When you have wealth, you are more off to argue your assessment value. So the assessors develop this kind of like callous against rich people, and they're not aware of the fuel that they're spreading onto the poor people. And you can see it right here at the end of the recession from 2009 to 2013. This is the recession. They bumped up the poor people and they gave a discount to the rich people. So yes, let's talk about this kind of thing. This is economic inequity, and this should not be happening in my community. Now, as an employer, this is incredibly bad for me because I know that our wealth has only grown at 36%. I know this because I have to pay people's salaries, and my staff can't afford to live here. That's one of the reasons why I live in a duplex. I can't afford to live here either. And it's just insane. But again, we have this kind of checkers conversation in the middle of a chess match. And we, feel good about like, oh yeah, I can tell you, Jersey City is a heck of a lot more dense than Lake Worth. So you had that density to be able to afford that infrastructure and to afford all of those things. So if you want to do a cyclovia or close off all the streets and ride around on bicycles, awesome. But you need to have the density to be able to provide that, but also the bicycle infrastructure for sidewalks. And I'm a cyclist. I bike to work. I bike to work today. So I know what you mean when you need that infrastructure and the economic parity of the infrastructure as well. And I hope this gets to it. I don't mean to like take it off the rails too much. Oh, incidentally, I forgot to show you all this. This is we did this back in 2009, and Lake Worth is kind of, here's downtown Lake Worth right there. You know, y'all have probably improved since then, but you can see where downtown West Palm Beach is, and then this is the town of Palm Beach there. But once you get west of 95, it just drops off the planet from a potency standpoint.
I'm going to unmute Mr. Tilbari for the next question, Joe, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a really good presentation, very illuminating, especially about the inequity and the tax policies. It's really kind of makes my skin crawl, but not surprising. And I know, you know, I lived in Lake Worth 20 years ago and I moved to DC. I lived there for 15 years. Couple of things. When I lived in Lake Worth, I was at the corner of L and 12th Avenue North. And I was one of those little houses, it was right up on the street and I had a huge backyard. But the interesting thing was, it always bugged me, was how wide the streets are in Lake Worth. They're so unnecessarily wide. And I would just think, God, if I could just get 10 feet of this pavement into my yard, you know, because it's totally unnecessary. And it makes me think about Lake Worth's burden of having all that extra impervious surface that they don't need. And now they have to maintain that. And it was a decision that was made probably in the 40s. I don't know when those roads were paved, maybe in the 40s, early 50s, but it was a really bad decision that the town made because they're really stuck with this, all this unnecessary stormwater mess now with these roads that are nothing but a nuisance. The width gives nothing, it has no value whatsoever to the community. So that's something that, you know, when you talked about that, and specifically Lake Worth, that really struck me. But I also want to talk about when I lived in DC, and I found your, you know, your discussion in Kansas City and Denver and the redlining that occurred under the New Deal and how that set for generations, that inequity. But my experience in DC was that these multi-generational, historical, very deeply historical African-American communities in Washington, DC, like Shaw and Bloomingdale and these Eckington, that just turned over within a matter of 2 decades from being very low income, low value, low, you know, you couldn't sell those row houses. Maybe you could sell them for $50,000, $60,000 in the 80s, you know, and Logan Circle. And now, of course, you know, they're going for 2-3 million. And a lot of those people, it was a double-edged sword for a lot of the African-American community, because a lot of them were able to finally cash out their equity that despite all the redlining. And a lot of them left. They went to Atlanta. They moved out to Calvert County, and they bought big, huge houses out there. And there was a real diaspora of the African-American community leaving with a lot of wealth. However, the downside is that those communities were important, and they've really lost their value as African-American historical communities because now they're unaffordable. They're filled with people who are the opposite of who established those communities. You know, in terms of their values and, you know, they're just transient, and they're just people with money and transient. And it's too much of a change from what was there. What the heart of the community was. I just felt it was too much of a change. That was ultra gentrification.
Yeah, but it's like, who made you God?
What's that?
You know, it's like you just made a judgment on people's values. You're applying your values against other people. Now it's like I get what you're saying, but it's like there's economic transition in every city. Actually, right. It's like this is a building in West Palm Beach on Clematis Street compared to the Darth Vader building. Architecturally, the building on the left, I would find it more beautiful. It's historic. It's also more potent than the skyscraper. But I can tell you that Anthony building on the left is the 3rd generation of building that was there. There used to be tents on Clematis Street, tent structures, and then they became wood structures, and eventually they all got matriculated. Cities transition. What was a poor neighborhood becomes a rich neighborhood. What's a rich neighborhood becomes a poor neighborhood. We have to allow for the fact that that's a natural part of cities. Now, the economic opportunity for our fellow citizens and their gains of wealth and their choices they make, you know, are you going to say, okay, sorry, you're Black, you're going to be stuck in that neighborhood forever, or you're Guatemalan, you're going to be stuck in that neighborhood forever because I like your food? You know, think of that, sounds a little weird. You know, I'm saying this as an Italian. I've lived in Italian neighborhoods. It's like, it's kind of fun. My uncle Louis had a bakery. My uncle Joe had a pastry shop. He paid my mom $300 to name me Joe. I understand ethnic neighborhoods, but to allow those businesses and those entrepreneurs the ability to transition the city, we need to understand what happens when we start to become, you know, a little overbearing with policy. So I would think that the folks in low wealth neighborhoods, yes, we do need to allow for folks to grow into an area, but we also need to backfill with new immigrants and new folks that come in at lower income. We need to be conscious of affordable housing.
Yeah.
I was beating that drum in downtown West Palm Beach from 1998 to 2003, and I never won that argument. You know, it was like, and sure enough, West Palm Beach has an affordability problem, but gee, who could have saw that coming? So we need to understand, you're either going to be doing the drive till you qualify, where you move people further out of your community and you have to drive them in, which is another cost and consequence. But let me show you all one thing, because you mentioned road widths, and that's a legacy of George Webb in the county, and it matriculated into city departments. When I moved to West Palm Beach in 1998, Nancy Graham was on this kind of bull rush to narrow streets in West Palm Beach. And in fact, we narrowed Olive through West Palm Beach into Lake Worth, and people in Lake Worth got pissed at us for doing that. And we're like, no, sorry, we're building a bike lane. Why should we widen roads in West Palm Beach so people could live in Lake Worth and drive through our living room as fast as possible? Take your time, use I-95, but not our neighborhoods. And we took it we got punched in the face by Lake Worth for that. And because it was this attitude of just widen the roads. I would agree with you. Narrow them, put in bike lanes, find some other ways. You only need a 10-foot wide lane unless you're going like 60 miles an hour. So rethink about your infrastructure. But I want to show you something that y'all need to be paying attention to. When we did this analysis in 2015, Rafael Clemente was like, could you look at the impact fees that all of the cities pay and where they go in the county? So here are all the different districts of Rafael Clemente manages the downtown association, the downtown authority in West Palm. And this little purple thing is the TCEA. I'll talk about that in a second, but this is the money that comes out. So if you look at Loxahatchee out here, people here pay, when they build out in the acreage, they're paying impact fees. Fair enough. Looking at inside the West Palm Beach district, which is here. So actually, let's go back. So zone 4, I think y'all are in zone 4. And then zone 5 is down to Boca and stuff like that in Boynton Beach. So here it is. This is the TCEA for downtown. So this is the transportation concurrency area. And then here are the projects that the county built with the impact fee money. And here's the money that came in the ground. So basically downtown is like 2% of the footprint. It's producing 21% of the money, which is amazing. And I didn't really know about, I knew this was going on, but we never looked at the math. And Raphael's like, look, if somebody wants to open a restaurant in downtown West Palm Beach, even though they're occupying a restaurant in what was another restaurant place, they have to pay an impact fee. This is highway robbery. So here's the money in the project. So here's the money that downtown West Palm Beach paid, and here's the projects. I was presenting this in West Palm Beach at the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm like, notice how the projects just kiss the edge. They're not even in the district. What's up with that? They're out here. Now, the second in command at the county's engineering department raised his hand, and he goes, oh, that's because the ordinance says we can only use the money for new lane widening, and we can't widen lanes in downtown West Palm Beach because there's too many buildings in the way. This guy said that with a straight face, like that's the edict of Job or something. Like, seriously, like that's the only thing you can do. And so I knew that was their policy. And I'm just like, all right, well, could you use that transportation money for the street trolley or for a bike lane? He goes, no, the ordinance says we can only widen new lanes. Now, sure enough, by the way, there's a little foreshadowing here. The first thing that should be running through your mind is what happened to the remaining $3 million? Okay, out in North Lake and I forget the Pratt Whitney Road area. The county built $50 million road widening project out there in the middle of nowhere, just at wide lanes. And y'all do this, just have fun, get in your car, drive west of 95 and just have yourself a holiday. Do it for a weekend. Just look at how wide those damn roads are. That's expensive. So let's recap. This is what downtown produced, West Palm Beach. This is what it got back. When you look at the entire zone 3 of Wellington, Loxahatchee, the acreage, all of that stuff, this is what it produced. This is what it got back. So they're investing all of that money out there in the roads. We just were like, well, could this stuff ever pay for fixing these roads in the future? This is $25,000 an acre is the average value of that district, while downtown West Palm Beach is $3 million. This stuff will never pay for the rehab of that road. So that's great that you took that impact fee money, went out west and dropped it down on roads that no one will ever be able to afford. But secondly, when you look at all the zones, this is the Boca zone. This is what they've produced over that 10-year period and what they got back. They should be pissed. This is zone 4, which is where y'all are. You got back a little bit more, but remember that goes all the way west. It doesn't just talk about West Lake Worth. This is what you produced and got back. So you got about 12% more than what you produced. This is zone 3, which is the acreage area. They got back 250% of their money. West Palm Beach is a loser, sorry. And North Palm Beach County is a big winner. By the way, did you know that the ordinance also says you can't take money from one zone and transfer it to the other? So here these people are, these government folks saying, oh, we've got to follow the ordinance, yet they're stealing from the fund and dumping it into infrastructure. And y'all aren't asking these questions. You know, it's funny, like George Webb got really pissed at me for presenting this chart. And I get this email from Raphael where he's going off about, you know, we question where Minicozzi got his data and da, da, da. So I sent him the email that he responded with his data with me, well, not me, but my staff saying, could you please send us all the raw Excel spreadsheets for your policy for the 10-year period. And they gave us the spreadsheet. We just turned it into a chart. So I forwarded an email back and I said, so if George is questioning my data, he should question his own data. But, you know, y'all need to have a conversation about this because y'all pay impact fees, those buildings downtown. And for some people that talk about rich people, realize when the developer builds that building, like the restaurants in downtown West Palm Beach have to, like a restaurant, to open a restaurant, you have to pay $100,000 of impact fee just to open a restaurant. Where do you get $100,000 if you're just starting a business? So right out the door, that's going to force a certain level of people that can pay that bill to cover the cost. The same is true for housing. So when you look at the cost of housing and like, oh, we're just getting rich people, it's because the developer that built that building has to pay that, pass that cost on whoever can afford it. And you certainly can't get affordable housing that way. So this is to be conscious of this stuff where you have these policies that have economic consequences in your community, but definitely minimize your lanes. Sorry about that non sequitur, but this is important stuff.
Joe, do you have time for a few more questions?
Oh yeah, I've got all the time you want. Yeah.
Okay. Next up will be Brenton Mixon.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, how you guys doing? It was an amazing presentation. Thank you. I am kind of new to the Palm Beach area. I'm actually from the DC area. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, kind of right outside of there. I understand what you're saying as far as economic transition goes, especially in certain communities. I'm trying to be more acclimated with Lake Worth. I think it's an amazing area. I love the vibe that's there. What would you? I understand that you were saying like we're still dealing with the effects of redlining and it's still happening today. As far as solutions go, or as far as something not necessarily to reverse it, but to understand it and come, such a negative connotation on the word like displacement. You know, and I understand you're saying be comfortable with economic transition, but what can you do to somehow, you know, mitigate the issue to some extent? If that makes, if I'm making any sense with this question, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. In fact, my city and my county both adopted reparations statements. And, you know, which is great, but in my community, what I'm expecting is, all right, let's look at that, and let's look at, because redlining was bad enough. You basically pummeled these neighborhoods for 30 years, extracting wealth from those families. A lot of those families in those neighborhoods are still here in Asheville. So it's not like we can't find the people that lived in those neighborhoods. So that's one thing, is we should seek out those individuals and be fair about what happened in the extortion of those neighborhoods, because once those neighborhoods removed equity or their ability to sell and transaction like any other neighborhood, remember what happened after 30 years in the 1950s and 60s. That's when you start to see urban renewal, eminent domain, where it was like, oh, hey, surprise, look, these neighborhoods are poor. Let's just go ahead and plow a highway through it. And I-95 is the elephant in the room for all of Southeast Florida.
Yeah,
it's worse down in Miami, where you get Liberty City and
Little Haiti,
Overtown, Little Haiti. And I think that's something that we need to be honest about. And this is the root of race, anti-racism, is first we have to acknowledge the fact that that was racist. And then let's start move into the space of how do we talk with the families that were impacted? How do we understand and track them down and realize that we are accountable, even though that didn't happen? And you see a lot of people say, well, it didn't happen in my time. It's like, well, actually it did. You drove on it. So, I think that I'm more familiar with West Palm Beach and the neighborhoods there, and the work that still is yet to be done in the Northwest neighborhood in Pleasant City and the North Side. In fact, West Palm Beach had a law that if you were Black, you couldn't live south of Banyan. And I think that law was in place until 1972 or 3 or something like that. Is insane. So those are all economic consequences. Banyan Boulevard, when you drive in Banyan in West Palm Beach, notice how wide it is. In fact, I think a lot of that is you could do, one of the things that we're recommending is citizens in our community. There's a group of folks that are like a land bank. Allow the neighborhood that was taken in the highway. There's a bunch of us that worked on trimming the highway down and getting some of that land back, and create a land bank for local entrepreneurs, discounted rent, and to allow folks to build equity in other means, and with using land as a basis. And then any kind of rent on that land goes back to community reparations that's decided by community leaders. So that we have a very strong racial justice coalition in town, and this is led by a group of elders in the community. It's basically as a self-perpetuating board and group of people that are self-empowered. So those are the kind of conversations I think maybe to start in every community. But first, the government needs to realize that they had a hand in those, and it's not this. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be something that's going to be an ongoing experiment, but we have to start moving in that direction.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions at this time. So, Joe, I'll let you close, but we just want to let everyone know, thank you for participating. And this meeting has been recorded and will be placed on the CRA's YouTube channel if you'd like to view it later on.
Sure.
Thanks again, Joan, for everything. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I hope that wasn't too nerdy, but thanks for your time, and thanks for having me do the show.
Perfect. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.